Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Abbie. I am a member here at Ascension, but I've been here for about 2 years. And for those 2 years, I've been mostly down at Marquette University. So I'm not really an active face around here. Down at Marquette, I'm studying bioinformatics and Spanish with a minor in business. And I've stayed active in my faith on Marquette's campus by being involved in Lutheran campus ministry. This past spring break, I had the opportunity to go to Nicaragua with LCM on an accompaniment trip. And today I'm here to share some of my experiences with you and how this changes my interpretation of today's reading. Preceding this lesson on judgment to the chosen 12, Jesus himself faced great judgment. He walked a controversial path of healing and loving, something that the Pharisees and teachers could not ever quite accept. The Pharisees were always there to question Jesus. When he forgave the sins of the paralyzed man, they asked, "Who can forgive sins but God alone?" When he ate with the tax collectors and sinners, the Pharisees questioned why. They were watching his every move. On one Sabbath, a man with a shriveled right hand approached Jesus, with the Pharisees and teachers of the law again closely watching. Now Jesus knows that the law of the Sabbath is that it's to be a day of rest, but of course, being the radical healer that he is, he heals the man, saying to the Pharisees, "I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?" Again in chapter 17 on the Sabbath, chapter 14 on the Sabbath, Jesus is at a Pharisee's house and another man needs healing. The Pharisees are again closely watching, looking to accuse Jesus of breaking the law. And he asks them, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they had no answer. He healed the man and then challenged them further. "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" Again, no response from the Pharisees. Jesus asks us, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" The Pharisees were so eager to find wrong in Jesus and so obsessed with their own laws and rule book that they failed to even be concerned about those who needed the healing. Jesus was not following the prim and proper rules, but in Jesus there was healing, and in Jesus there was love. The Pharisees became so obsessed with pointing to the ways in which Jesus had fallen short of the law that they lost sight of the very purpose of the law, to serve God better. And in this story, we are like the Pharisees. We have judged our neighbors before we have loved them. We have judged our neighbors before we have even considered our own wrongdoings. And we must instead choose to lead our lives with love. There are a lot of places in our world which are crying for help, including many right in our backyards, and Nicaragua certainly makes that list. While in Nicaragua, I had the opportunity to stay alone in my homestay in San Francisco Libre. Although I was excited to put my years of learning Spanish to a real test, I was also pretty terrified and nervous of the language barrier that still existed. Mirna, my homestay mom, welcomed me into her home for 3 nights. As she first showed me around, I certainly had my fair share of judgments. It was a humble 2-bedroom home with a mixture between mud and concrete for floors and walls. It didn't feel very secure. The door to my bedroom was a sheet, and the kitchen was small, with only basic necessities. Don't even get me started about the bathroom. The journey out to it involved stepping over a muddy pig who ended up starting to follow me. Needless to say, I kept my bathroom visits to a minimum. I was definitely out of my comfort zone, and I had taken for granted some of our American standards for cleanliness and hygiene. After staying in her home, I could certainly give you a list of all the things that we could come in and fix. Wouldn't be unusual for people from a country like ours to come in and fix the flooring or the leaks in the roof or build a shower or a flushing toilet. But these are all superficial fixes for things that Nicaraguans don't really view as their most pressing problems. It's easy to come in and make judgments and assumptions about others and what they need, but Jesus calls us to lead our lives with love. He calls us to love people and build relationships with them so that we can learn how to better serve one another. And that is what I learned to do better on this trip. When we talked about family, Myrna opened up that her husband had recently died. She had 3 kids, one who lived in Managua, the capital of Nicaragua, at the university, and the other 2 who lived with her in San Francisco Libre, a more rural area. They struggled with poverty because she was currently unemployed. Her father hadn't allowed her to get an education, so she had very limited options. When I asked her about whether there were more opportunities in Managua, she said that yes, there probably were, but it was nowhere near as safe as this community. She really wasn't asking for a lot. She wanted to live in a safe area while being able to provide for her family. This reality, the impossibility of fulfilling simple needs while staying healthy and safe, exists in our own backyards as well. Listening to her, it was obvious that she didn't need anyone's help. She didn't need a nicer house or better clothes or any material thing. The only thing she felt she was missing was the dignity of a job so that she could support herself and her kids. In more urban areas of Nicaragua and many developing countries, sweatshops are a common practice employment source. We can all imagine the atrocities of the working conditions and living conditions of workers in sweatshops, but on this trip we actually had the opportunity to visit a sweatshop and see the reality firsthand. A union worker met with us to accompany us for our tour, and before meeting the plant manager, I had made some assumptions. I assumed that he must be heartless to allow these conditions to persist in his shop, but what I really found is the opposite. He's genuinely trying his hardest and doing his best to support his workers while still competing to keep them employed. He's competing with Asian sweatshops that have less regulations, worse conditions, and in many cases don't allow unions. The maternity and paternity leave benefits that he talked about in his shop are better than the law in the US requires, but that's a topic of discussion for another day. Now, by no means am I saying these things to support sweatshops or oppressive working conditions, but we have judged these people without first looking at ourselves. It is so hypocritical that we allow ourselves to look at these sweatshops and condemn others for the situation without admitting that we ourselves support these practices. When you see an article of clothing that is at a huge discount and are shocked by how the company can offer such a low price, do we ever think about who made the clothing? Generally, no. We're also excited to get a bargain in our consumer culture that we don't question things. This is the plank in our eye that Jesus is speaking of. During the sweatshop tour, we saw several articles of clothing, and we were told what price that the shop received for the product compared to what price these articles sell at here in the States. For example, they made less than $10 for producing a pair of jeans for a well-known US brand that sells that same pair of jeans for $90 or more here in the US. Rather than strictly being appalled by the sweatshops, it's time that we reflect on the corporate greed in our country and the consumerist culture that allows us to love these things more than people. The majority of these sweatshops are laboring only for US brands and products. But if we lead our lives with love, we'll be more open to realizing our own flaws before condemning others. Only when we fix our own flaws can we really have the power to help others. If we lead all of our actions with love and healing, as Jesus did, we are promised blessings and love in return. He says, "Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. The measure you give will be the measure you get back." He says, "Those who listen to what he says and do what he does will be like a man building a house on a firm foundation. Nothing can shake it." We must build a firm foundation by leading our lives with love. Only with this firm foundation in love and continuous reflection and improvement of our own lives and flaws will we be able to help others in the way they need to be helped and the way they want to be helped. We must see people as people and seek kinship with them, and we must reflect and improve on our own lives to be able to help others. In the relationships we build, there is love. In the relationships we build, there is healing. In preparation for this trip, our group read and discussed a short book called Toxic Charity in order to gain a better understanding of why our trip was based on accompaniment instead of service work. In many cases, when we enter communities to do mission work, we implicitly are judging them. By assuming their needs, we're making judgments about what is wrong with the community, while they might not have the same viewpoint at all. Instead, if we work to build relationships and lead our lives with love, we can learn how we might be able to help in a way that empowers the community and keeps them central to their own improvement. When we build relationships instead of judging from afar, we begin to embrace our common humanity, and that love in those relationships paralyzes all judgments. I have so many wonderful memories of Nicaragua, from playing capture the flag with kids in the street, to sharing meals and talking about dreams and so much more. By opening my heart to relationships with these people in Nicaragua, I was greeted with open arms by everyone I met. In the conversations we had with members of the Youth Network Against Violence in San Francisco Libre, in workshops on consent and responsible parenting, we found there to be more similarities in our experiences than differences. And by walking alongside people, we are able to empower them to continue their work in education for their community. Maya Angelou once said, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." We should strive for equal relationships and work to empower those in our community and other communities to continue their progress, rather than questioning their methods or asserting ourselves and our opinions. And we should choose to lead our lives with love rather than judgment.